I am Julia Sinclair, and I am 27 years old. I want to tell you the day my heart broke in a way I never thought possible. I still remember the moment I knew he chose her and left me behind. It happened fast, like a door closing before I could run inside. The air felt heavy. My hands were shaking. And the truth hit me with a pain I could not hide. I was standing right there, close enough to hear his voice, close enough to feel the distance growing inside his eyes. He looked at her the way I always prayed he would look at me, and I felt something inside my chest fall apart, slowly, painfully, like glass slipping from my fingers. I wish I could say I was strong in that moment, but the truth is I could barely breathe. I tried to smile, tried to pretend I was fine, tried to look away before the tears rose, but my body betrayed me. My heart was like a closed hand with something sharp inside. And I knew in one breath that everything I hoped for was ending. He chose her. And I was still there, frozen, watching the life I dreamed about slip away from me. It felt wrong, unreal, as if I were watching myself from outside my own skin, like a stranger living a life I didn't want. A life built on silence and fear. I never thought he would leave me behind. We were close. Maybe not lovers, not a couple, not an official US, but we lived in that delicate space between friendship and something deeper. A space filled with soft looks and long talks and dreams neither of us said out loud. I held on to that space like a child holding a fragile wish. And then, in one moment, it all disappeared. She touched his arm. He smiled at her, and something inside me whispered that this was the end. A quiet, slow, gentle ending that hurt more because he didn't even notice me break. I remember walking away, step by step, trying not to make a sound. My legs felt weak, like they didn't belong to me. The world around me faded into a quiet blur. People were laughing, talking, moving, but all I could hear was the echo of his choice. Her, not me, and I felt small, invisible, like a shadow passing through a world that didn't care. Wanted to disappear, I wanted to forget him. But the truth is, I loved him, deeply, silently, more than I ever wanted to admit. And losing someone you never really had still breaks you like losing everything. I walked to the back of the building, a place no one usually went. My breathing was fast, and my eyes burned. The wind was cold on my face, and I pressed my hands against the wall behind me to stay upright. I felt the first tear fall before I even understood what was happening. Then another, then more. Tears that tasted like fear, like sadness, like the truth I avoided for months. I whispered his name without thinking, and it came out broken, like a memory falling apart. I wanted him to follow me. I wanted him to notice I wasn't okay. But he didn't. And that hurt more than anything. I stayed there, hidden, listening to my heartbeat echo in my ears. I felt alone, but not the normal kind of alone. It was the kind that stays inside your bones, the kind that changes you. And I knew in that quiet, painful moment that nothing would be the same again. Something ended. Something I didn't want to lose. Something I wasn't ready to let go. The ground felt cold under my shoes. The world felt different, and all I could do was breathe through the ache. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps. Someone was coming. For a second, hope sparked inside me, sharp and bright. Maybe it was him. Maybe he noticed I was gone. Maybe he cared enough to look for me. I lifted my head, wiped my tears fast, trying to look normal. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my throat. The steps came closer, echoing softly in the empty hallway. But I didn't know who was about to turn that corner. And I didn't know that whatever happened next would change everything again. When the footsteps finally reached the corner, I held my breath without meaning to. My fingers curled against my clothes, and my chest tightened the way it always did when I hoped for something too much. But it wasn't him. It was someone else. Someone I didn't expect. Someone who looked at me with quiet surprise, like they had walked into a secret I never meant to share. I forced a smile, but it was weak and thin, like a thread ready to break. I tried to pull myself together to wipe the last tear from my cheek before it fell, but my hands were trembling. And the moment their eyes met mine, I knew they saw everything. The sadness, the hurt, the truth. They asked if I was okay, their voice soft, almost afraid to touch the air around me. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to pretend. But the words stuck in my throat, heavy and false. I shook my head, just a little, and the air between us changed. It grew still, warm, almost protective. I didn't want comfort. I didn't want anyone to witness the part of me I tried so hard to hide. But something in their quiet presence made it hard to push them away. They didn't step closer. They didn't ask questions. They just stayed there, near enough to make me feel less alone, far enough to let me breathe. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the wind cool my face. I thought of him again. His smile, his voice, the way he looked at her, the way he didn't look at me. The pain rose again, slow and deep, like a wave I couldn't stop. And when I opened my eyes, I felt myself falling into the soft silence between me and the person in front of me. They didn't move. They didn't look away. And I felt something strange relief. Not the happy kind, not the healing kind, but the kind that keeps your heart beating when you think it might stop. I whispered that I needed a moment. My voice broke on the last word. They nodded gently, turning their eyes to the floor to give me space. I appreciated that more than I could say, because I didn't need someone to fix me. I just needed someone not to leave. The cold wall pressed against my back, grounding me. My thoughts were tangled, messy, full of memories I didn't ask for, and dreams I didn't know how to bury. I wondered how long he had been drifting away from me. Maybe I ignored the signs. Maybe I believed too much in the small things, slow smiles, long talks, shared secrets, quiet moments when the world felt soft around us. A part of me wanted to run back and see him again, even if it hurt. Another part begged me to leave before I broke more. I felt caught between who I was and who I wished I could be. When the wind blew again, I heard laughter in the distance. Her laughter and his. Light, easy, close. The sound cut through me like a blade made of truth. I pressed my lips together to hold in the ache. My eyes stung again, but I refused to cry in front of anyone else. The person near me took a small breath, as if choosing whether to speak. And then they did. They said they saw everything. Every look, every moment, every silent hope I tried to hide. Their voice wasn't judging, it wasn't pitying. It was honest, soft, understanding in a way I didn't expect. They said I deserved someone who chose me without doubt. Someone who looked at me like I was the only one in the room. Someone who didn't make me stand in the dark, waiting for a possibility that would never come. The words hit me hard, but they didn't hurt. They settled inside me like a truth I wasn't ready to face, but needed to hear. For a second, I felt the weight inside me shift, just a little. I looked up at them again, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel invisible. Their eyes didn't hold me like a question. They held me like a person who mattered. But before I could answer, before I could speak or breathe or understand what any of this meant, I heard another set of footsteps in the distance. Familiar ones. And my heart jumped, sharp and painful, because I knew exactly who they belonged to. He was coming closer. He was coming toward us. And I didn't know if I was ready to see him with the truth still fresh on my face. Something in the air tightened. Something inside me braced itself. Because the moment he saw me would change everything again. He appeared at the end of the hallway like a memory I wasn't ready to face. His steps were slow, careful, almost unsure, and for a moment I wished I could disappear into the wall behind me. My breath caught in my throat, and my chest tightened so fast it felt like a hand closing around my heart. He wasn't laughing now. He wasn't smiling the way he did with her. His eyes were searching, moving from the empty space around us until they finally found me. And when they did, I felt something sharp move inside me, something between longing and fear. He said my name, soft but clear, like it mattered. Julia. The sound made my knees weak, but I straightened myself, trying to stand steady, trying not to let him see the storm inside me. The person beside me stepped back a little, giving us space, but not leaving completely. Their presence stayed like a quiet shield around my pain, even without a single word. He noticed them, of course, and something flickered in his eyes, confusion. Maybe guilt, maybe something I had no right to hope for anymore. He took another step toward me, and I felt the warmth of his presence before he even got close. It was strange, painful, familiar. The way he looked at me was the way he used to look during the late nights we talked about everything and nothing. When I thought maybe, just maybe, there was something real growing between us. But now that look felt like a lie that became heavy inside my chest. I pressed my fingers together behind my back to stop them from shaking. He asked if I was okay, simple words, empty words. But they hit me like a wave. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My voice was lost somewhere in the space between the truth and the hurt I was trying to swallow. I didn't want him to see how broken I felt. I didn't want him to know he had the power to do this to me. So I said I was fine. The lie sounded thin, fragile, ready to fall apart at the first breath. He didn't believe it. I saw it in the way his eyes softened, in the way his shoulders lowered, in the way he looked at me like he wanted to take back something he couldn't. Then he did something I wasn't ready for. He reached out, as if to touch my arm. Instinctively, I stepped back. It was a small movement, but he noticed, and the way his expression changed made my heart twist. I saw hurt flash across his face, quick and quiet, like he never thought I would pull away. But I couldn't let him touch me. Not after seeing him choose her so easily, so clearly, so publicly. Not after feeling myself break because of him. He said he wanted to explain. The words felt wrong, heavy, late. I didn't want explanations. I wanted the truth that came before he walked toward her instead of me. I wanted the choice he didn't make. I wanted the moment he gave to someone else. My eyes burned again, and I blinked hard, trying to keep the tears inside. The hallway felt smaller now, the air tighter. The person beside me stepped a little closer, not enough to interrupt, but enough to remind me I wasn't standing alone, even if it felt like it. He noticed that too. His jaw tightened, and something unreadable passed through his eyes. He looked between us with a quiet tension that made the moment heavier. I told him it wasn't the time. The words came out low, almost a whisper, but firm enough to make him step back. He didn't want to, I could see that, but he did. His eyes stayed locked on mine, full of something that made my chest ache all over again. Regret? Confusion? Something deeper? I didn't know. I didn't want to think about it. For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt thick, like the pause before a storm. Then he opened his mouth again, but the words didn't come. He just looked at me, struggling to say something he hadn't said before, something he should have said earlier, something that maybe would have changed everything. But before he could speak, we heard her voice calling his name from the room behind him. Bright, happy, expecting him. His body froze. His eyes lowered. And just like that, the truth pressed between us again like a wall. He turned his head a little, just enough to hear her better. Then slowly, painfully, he looked back at me. In that silence I knew, even now, he still wasn't choosing me. And the worst part was that I could see it. I could feel it. I could taste the heartbreak in the air like it was a part of me, but he didn't walk away. Not yet. He took one more breath, steadying himself, gathering words I didn't know if I wanted to hear. And that was when everything around us shifted again, quietly, dangerously, before he even spoke. He stood there, breathing slowly, like each inhale was a question, and each exhale was something he was afraid to say. His eyes stayed on mine, steady, searching, almost desperate in a way I didn't understand. It felt like he was reaching for something that wasn't there anymore, something he let go the moment he walked toward her. My heart trembled inside my chest, caught between wanting to hear him and wanting to run far from every word he might say. He whispered my name again, softer this time, like a confession meant only for me. Julia. My throat tightened. My shoulders went stiff. I wanted to ask him why he was here, why he cared now, why he thought words could fix what choices had already broken. But I didn't have the strength to say any of it. I just stood still, watching him, waiting for the words he was struggling to release. He said he never meant to hurt me. The moment the sentence left his lips, something inside me cracked quietly. It wasn't anger, it wasn't relief. It was that strange kind of sadness that comes when the truth arrives too late. I looked at him, unable to hide the pain in my eyes. I wanted to say that intentions don't protect hearts. Choices do. Actions do. And he chose her. Not me. Not the girl who stayed by his side through every long night, every moment of silence, every soft smile that felt like a whisper of something more. The person beside me shifted just a little, but didn't speak. Their presence felt steady, warm, like a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. He noticed them again, and something darker grew behind his eyes. Jealousy? Maybe. Confusion? Probably. But whatever it was, it didn't matter anymore. He had made his decision before this moment. All that was left were the pieces. He took a step closer, slow as if approaching a wounded animal, afraid of making the pain worse. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt caught between wanting to believe him and wanting to protect myself. From the same story repeating again and again. He said he needed to explain what happened. His voice cracked a little, the first sign of emotion I had seen from him since everything shattered inside me. I told him he didn't owe me anything. The words came out calm, almost steady, but inside I felt the echo of every memory we shared. He looked hurt by my answer, like he expected me to fight for his explanation, like he wanted me to give him a chance he had already thrown away. But I couldn't carry that weight anymore. Not after seeing the way he looked at her. Not after hearing the way he said her name. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated, torn, unsure of how to pull himself out of the mess he created. He said things weren't what they looked like, that he needed time, that life got complicated, that nothing between us was ever simple. I listened, but the words felt like smoke floating, fading, impossible to hold. My heart wanted to catch them. My mind told me not to. I asked him the question I was afraid to hear the answer to. Did you choose her? His eyes froze. His breath stopped for a second. And in that tiny, silent moment, everything between us trembled. He didn't answer right away. That silence told me more than words ever could. He didn't deny it. He didn't correct it. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He just stayed quiet. The sound of her laughing again in the distance reached us like a soft echo, and his eyes shifted toward the noise, only for a second, but enough to break me all over again. My chest tightened, and the tears I tried to hold back began to fill my eyes. I didn't want to cry, especially not in front of him, but sometimes your heart doesn't ask for permission. Saw the tears forming, and his face softened with panic, regret, something close to sorrow. He stepped forward again, whispering my name, pleading in a voice I had never heard from him before. He reached out a little as if wanting to hold me, to stop the fall happening inside me, but he stopped halfway. Because the person beside me moved, not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to stand closer, like a silent reminder that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't abandoned in the dark, that someone else saw me when he didn't, and that simple movement changed everything. He looked at them with a sudden, sharp emotion, then turned his eyes back to me with fear that wasn't about losing me, but about realizing he already had. He opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could get a single word out, her voice called his name once more, louder, sweeter, clearer than before. And this time, he flinched. He looked back, then he looked at me. And in that small, painful exchange, the truth settled inside me like a quiet storm finally reaching the ground. He couldn't choose me. Not even now. Not even when he saw my tears. Not even when he saw what he had done. But he also wasn't ready to walk away. That impossible space between us grew deeper, heavier, and more dangerous than ever. And in the very next moment, everything inside that hallway shifted again in a way none of us were ready for. The air around us felt thick, almost too heavy to breathe. as if the hallway itself knew we had reached a point none of us could return from. He stood there, torn between two worlds, one calling his name from behind him, the other trembling right in front of him. And for a long, painful moment, he didn't move. His chest rose and fell slowly, like he was fighting with something inside himself. I watched him, feeling every second stretch into something sharp enough to hurt. He whispered my name again, Julia, softer this time, almost broken. It was the way he said it that made my heart twist. Like he finally understood something he should have seen much earlier. His eyes were full of questions, regret, and something deeper that made the air between us tremble. For a second I almost stepped toward him, almost let myself believe that maybe he was finally choosing me, even if it was too late. But the person beside me shifted again, gently, just enough to remind me where I was and what really happened. Their presence felt like a soft hand holding the pieces of my heart together. And when I looked at him, I saw concern, real concern, something honest, something steady, something he had never given me without hesitation. He noticed that look. He saw how my eyes softened when I turned toward someone who didn't make me feel small. Something inside him cracked. I saw it clearly. His jaw tensed, his shoulders stiffened. His eyes darkened with an emotion he tried to hide. He didn't want me to walk toward anyone else. He didn't want to lose me. But he also didn't choose me when it mattered. That was the truth that stood between us like a wall neither of us knew how to climb. He took a small step in my direction, but his feet felt heavy, unsure. I could feel the tension in him, the fear, the regret, the confusion. He looked like a man trying to reach a door he had closed with his own hands. And maybe that was why it hurt so much to watch him struggle now. He said he needed to talk to me alone. The words came slow, careful, full of a kind of desperation I had never heard from him before. He wanted me to send the other person away. He wanted to keep this moment between us, untouched by anyone else. But the moment he said it, my heart pulled back inside my chest. Because when he had her beside him, laughing, smiling, touching his arm, he never tried to hide it. He never protected my feelings. He never worried about the hurt in my eyes. So why now? Why now when the truth was already written between us? I told him quietly that I didn't think we had anything left to talk about alone. My voice shook a little, but it was honest. His face fell, slowly, like the ground under him had moved. He looked at me with disbelief, as if the idea of me turning away had never crossed his mind. He opened his mouth to argue, but then her voice echoed again, closer this time. She was looking for him, calling with affection that wrapped around his name like a ribbon he couldn't untie. His eyes flicked toward the sound, and I saw the moment he broke. He hated that pull, he hated that connection. He hated that he couldn't ignore her voice, but he didn't move to stop it. He didn't tell her to wait, and that told me everything. I breathed in slowly, the cold air burning my lungs. He reached out finally, fully this time, and his fingers almost touched mine. I felt the heat of his hand before I felt the pain inside my heart catch fire again. I stepped back. Not fast, not cruel, just enough to protect myself from the hope that always betrayed me. His hand dropped.
Good.
His eyes lost something inside them, something that used to make me feel safe. Now it felt like a fading light. He whispered that he didn't want to lose me. His voice trembled on the last word. Lose. But you can't lose someone you never chose. The truth lived behind my lips, but I didn't say it. I didn't need to. The look in my eyes said everything. He took a step forward anyway, still trying, still reaching. And then footsteps approached. Soft, careful, familiar. She appeared. Her smile was bright, beautiful, innocent. She didn't know. I didn't see the storm inside the hallway. She didn't understand the quiet war happening in the space between our hearts. She simply walked toward him, the way someone walks toward a choice already made. And he turned to her. Not fully, not confidently, but enough. He turned. My breath left me in one slow, painful exhale. The parts of me that still hoped began to crumble, quiet and small. The person beside me moved even closer now, almost without thinking, their hand brushing mine but not taking it, giving me the space to decide. He looked back at me one last time, and in that single look, I saw the truth he couldn't speak. He wanted me. But he had chosen her, and he didn't know how to undo it. Before any of us could say a word, before he could reach for me again or step back toward her, something happened that none of us were ready for. Something that would change the weight of everything that came next. The moment stretched so tightly between us that it felt like the air might break. She stood by his side now, her hand lightly touching his arm, unaware of the storm she had walked into. He didn't lean into her touch. He didn't pull away either. He just stood there, trapped between two different worlds, two different hearts, two different versions of who he wanted to be. And I felt that hesitation like a blade pressed carefully against my skin. She looked at me and smiled politely. The kind of smile someone gives when they don't understand the tension, but can feel it hanging in the space. Her eyes were kind, too kind. It made the ache inside my chest twist in a strange way. None of this was her fault. She didn't choose to be the one he turned toward. She didn't choose to be the one he smiled at earlier. She didn't choose to be the reason my heart cracked. He did. She said his name softly, asking if everything was okay. Her voice was gentle, almost worried, and when he turned toward her, even slightly, I felt something inside me fold in on itself. The way he looked at her wasn't full of love or certainty. It wasn't bright or warm. It was confused, tangled, like he was caught in a place he didn't want to be but didn't know how to step out of. He answered her with a quiet, "Yeah, I'm fine," but his eyes drifted back to me again, like a habit he couldn't break. That hurt more than any clean goodbye ever could. Because how do you heal from someone who keeps looking at you like you're still a part of his heart, even after choosing someone else? The person beside me must have sensed the weight growing inside me because they shifted closer, their arm brushing mine with the softest touch, not claiming me, not replacing him. Just reminding me that I wasn't standing alone in this moment meant to break me. Their presence wrapped around my pain like a warm coat I didn't expect to need. He noticed. His eyes widened just a little, and something flashed across his face. Fear, jealousy, or maybe the sudden realization that, while he hesitated, someone else could step in. Someone who saw me. Someone who knew I was hurting. Someone who didn't let me stand in the cold alone. She followed his gaze, looking between me and the person beside me, her expression shifting slightly with confusion. She sensed something was wrong. Her hand tightened on his arm, subtly, protectively. And for the first time he reacted, his body tensed. Like that touch grounded him in a world he didn't fully choose but felt responsible for. My heart cracked deeper. He opened his mouth, maybe to explain something to her, maybe to reach for me again, maybe to finally say something true. But before he could speak, she turned to him with soft concern and asked if they could leave, if he could walk with her, if they could go somewhere quieter. In the way she asked it, sweet, gentle, innocent. It was the kind of question you say yes to without thinking. He looked at me one more time. One last time, and in that slow, silent moment, his entire soul seemed to pull my way. His eyes were full of everything he couldn't say: regret, longing, confusion, fear. It wasn't a look of someone who wanted to walk away. But he did. He nodded to her. That single nod felt like the last thread snapping inside my chest. He started to walk with her, but his steps were heavy, slow, almost dragging. Like his body was moving forward while his heart was being pulled backward. And I stood there, watching the man I loved walk away with someone else, not because he didn't feel anything for me, but because he didn't choose me. The hallway stretched longer with every step he took. My breath grew tight, sharp, shallow. My vision blurred for a second, but I blinked fast, refusing to let tears fall again in front of them. When they reached the corner, she leaned closer to him, talking softly. He didn't look back. Not until the very last second. He turned his head just slightly, enough for only me to see. And that look, God, that look. It wasn't happy. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't certain. It was the look of a man who knew he had just broken something he would never get back. And then he disappeared around the corner. The silence he left behind was louder than any goodbye. My knees weakened, and before I could fall, the person beside me touched my shoulder gently, grounding me in a world that suddenly felt too empty. I closed my eyes, trying to catch my breath, because even though he walked away, the part of him that stayed in my heart refused to go with him. And I didn't know yet that this moment, this quiet, painful moment, was about to pull me into a story much bigger than the heartbreak in front of me. Because what came next changed everything. The moment he disappeared around the corner, the hallway seemed to collapse into silence. Not the peaceful kind, no. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your ribs, that made your heartbeat sound too loud, that made the air feel too thin to breathe. I kept staring at the empty space he left behind, as if somehow he might walk back, as if somehow he would undo everything with just one step in my direction. But he didn't. And the more seconds passed, the more real it became. He was gone. The person beside me didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. They didn't try to fix anything. They just stayed close, their presence warm and steady, like a gentle hand holding the part of me that was shaking too hard to stand alone. I swallowed slowly, trying to push back the tight knot forming inside my throat. My chest ached in a way that made breathing feel like a battle I wasn't winning. When I finally found the strength to move, I turned away from the corner he vanished into. The world felt heavier. My heart felt tired. My legs felt as if each step required courage I didn't know I still had. The person walked beside me, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel their quiet support in every step we took. We reached the little courtyard behind the building. A small open space where the wind whispered softly between the old brick walls. I sat on a bench, letting the cold wood anchor me. My hands were trembling again, so I placed them on my knees, pressing them down gently. The wind brushed against my face, cooling the heat in my eyes. I focused on breathing slowly in, slowly out, trying to stop the pain from spreading deeper. The person sat beside me, leaving enough space not to crowd me. They looked at me gently, their eyes soft, patient, understanding in a way that made me want to cry all over again. I wasn't used to someone staying during my worst moments. I wasn't used to someone not turning away when my heart fell apart. I whispered that I didn't understand why it hurt so much. My voice was thin, almost fragile. They listened without interrupting, and that alone made something inside me loosen. I told them I knew he liked her. I told them I knew he smiled at her in ways he never smiled at me. I told them I wasn't stupid. I saw the signs, the changes, the slow shift in his eyes. But knowing something doesn't protect you from the moment it becomes real. They nodded, their expression soft, and said something simple, something I didn't expect. Because you loved him with hope. Hope. That word hit me deep, because it was true. I didn't fall for him because he promised me anything. I fell because of small moments, quiet moments, moments that made me believe there was something between us, even if neither of us said it out loud. Hope was the bridge I kept walking across, even when the ground under it cracked. I closed my eyes, letting that truth sink into me like a slow, painful wave. When I opened them again, the person beside me was watching me with a gentle concern. There was no pity, no judgment, only honesty. And for the first time that day, I felt like I wasn't drowning alone. They asked me if I wanted to talk or sit in silence. I didn't know what I wanted. Everything felt too big, too raw, too heavy, so I said I didn't know. They nodded, and we just stayed there, breathing the same cold air, letting the moment settle between us without forcing anything. After a while, they spoke again, quietly, carefully. They said they had noticed things long before today. They'd seen the way I looked at him. They'd seen the way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching. They'd seen the tension, the pauses, the almost moments. They said it was obvious something deep lived between us, but something kept him from choosing it. Hearing that hurt, but it also healed something small inside me. Because I wasn't imagining it, I wasn't inventing a story. The feelings were real, the connection existed. I just wasn't the one he walked toward. Sometimes the truth is cruel and kind at the same time. I sat there quietly, letting the words settle, letting the wind dry the last tears on my cheeks. Slowly, a soft calm began to form in my chest. Not peace, not healing, just a moment where the pain stopped screaming. They offered to walk me home. Their voice was gentle, steady. I almost said yes, but something inside me whispered that I wasn't ready to leave this place yet. Not with the echo of his choice still hanging in the air. So I shook my head softly. They didn't insist. They just nodded and said they would stay a little longer then, right there with me, until I felt ready to stand again. And in that moment, sitting in the cold air with someone who didn't leave, I realized something important. Sometimes the people who stay quietly beside you carry more truth than the ones you waited for with your whole heart. I didn't know it yet, but this moment, this quiet, fragile moment, was the beginning of something that would change everything I thought I understood about love, loss, and the way hearts find each other in the shadows of goodbye. We stayed in the courtyard for a long time, long enough for the sun to shift and paint the walls with soft gold. The world outside moved as always, cars passing, people talking, doors opening and closing. But in that small space between us, everything felt slower, quieter, almost suspended in the air. I held my hands together, my fingers twisting gently, grounding myself in a moment I didn't expect to need this much. The person beside me didn't rush me. They didn't fill the silence with empty words. They just stayed. And that simple act felt like a warm blanket around the coldest parts of my heart. Every now and then I caught them glancing at me with a soft expression, the kind that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't ready to read into that. My heart was too fragile, too bruised, but it was impossible not to notice the kindness in their eyes. After a while, I whispered that I didn't know how to let go. The words came out like a confession I wasn't ready to make. They turned slightly, giving me their full attention without pushing me to say more. I told them it felt like there was a rope tied around my chest, one end in my hands and the other in his. Even though he walked away, I was still holding my part. I didn't know how to loosen my grip without breaking something inside me. They nodded slowly, their voice calm when they answered. They said letting go wasn't an act, it was a process. A slow one, a painful one. They said it didn't happen all at once, not with one decision, not with one moment. It happened in pieces, in small breaths, in quiet days, in the slow fading of a hope that once felt bright enough to light your whole world. Their words sank deeply into me, like soft drops of truth hitting the surface of a still lake. I looked down at my hands, noticing how tightly I was gripping my fingers together. I tried to loosen them, gently, slowly, one by one. It felt symbolic, strange, but real. And when I finally breathed out the air I'd been holding for too long, something inside me loosened too. The person beside me asked if I wanted to walk. Not far, just around the courtyard. Enough to help the heaviness leave my body. I hesitated at first, unsure if I could trust my legs, unsure if I wanted to move at all, but then I nodded. We stood up slowly, and the ground felt different under my feet, like I was stepping into a world that didn't hurt as sharply as before. We walked in silence, side by side, our steps quiet against the stone path. The air smelled like the first hints of evening, soft, cool, carrying the scent of distant leaves and fading sunlight. My chest still ached, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. It was a slow ache, the kind that lets you breathe even if it stings each time. At one point, they asked if he knew how deeply I cared. I stayed silent for a moment, unsure how to answer. Then I said I thought he did. Maybe not fully, maybe not clearly, but enough. They said something I wasn't ready to hear but needed. They said sometimes people don't choose the ones who care the most. Sometimes they choose comfort, or timing, or fear, or the idea of something easier. And sometimes they choose wrong. I stopped walking. Those last words echoed inside me like a distant bell. Choose wrong. I had felt that possibility deep in my bones long before today. But hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a way I didn't expect. I looked at them, and for the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel like I was falling apart. I felt grounded, held up by something steady. Not love, not romance, just presence. Honest, gentle presence. We continued walking slowly until we reached the far wall of the courtyard. The bricks were warm from the sunlight, and I leaned against them for a moment, closing my eyes. The person stood in front of me, giving me space but staying close enough that I could feel their quiet support if I needed it. They told me they were proud of me, proud that I stayed standing, proud that I faced something so painful without letting it swallow me whole. The compliment hit me harder than I expected. A tear slipped down my cheek again, but this time it wasn't from heartbreak. It was from relief, from feeling understood, cared for, seen. I opened my eyes slowly, breathing in the soft evening air. The courtyard didn't feel as heavy anymore. The walls didn't feel as close. My heart still hurt, but the pain didn't feel like the end of everything. It felt like the beginning of something quieter, softer, something that might one day lead to healing. We walked back to the bench, and as we sat down again, they said gently that heartbreak often brings people into our lives who are meant to stay. People who step into the spaces others leave empty. People who show us that love isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, patient. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. But I felt the truth of their words settle deep inside me, and I didn't know it then. But sitting on that bench, in the dimming light of the courtyard, I was already beginning to step into a new chapter, one where pain and healing would walk together, one slow step at a time. Night arrived slowly, painting the courtyard with soft shadows that stretched across the ground like long, gentle hands touching everything with quiet calm. The world around us grew quieter as the sky darkened, and the first stars began to appear, faint at first, then brighter. I felt the cold air brushing against my skin, carrying the scent of evening, carrying a sense of ending, and something new I didn't understand yet. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't the heavy silence from before. It was softer, almost comforting, the kind that lets your heart breathe without forcing it to forget. The person beside me leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on their knees, their gaze lost somewhere in the night. They didn't push me to talk. They didn't expect anything from me. I just stayed, and that simple act made the cold inside me feel less sharp. After a long moment, I whispered that I didn't know what to do next. My voice broke on the last word, like it carried the weight of everything I had held inside for months. They turned their head toward me slowly, their eyes gentle, warm enough to melt the edges of my pain. They told me it was okay not to know, that hearts don't follow plans. That healing isn't a path you walk with clarity, but with courage, even when your steps are small and unsteady. I looked at my hands, noticing how they weren't trembling as much anymore. I whispered that I felt empty, like a part of me had been pulled out, and the space it left behind hurt more than the part itself. They nodded softly. They said emptiness was just the beginning of a space waiting to be filled again with truth, with new dreams, with new people who cared in ways I never expected. Their words made something warm spread slowly inside my chest, not enough to erase the pain, but enough to remind me that I was still alive, still capable of feeling more than heartbreak. I breathed in deeply, letting the cool night air move through me like a quiet wave brushing against the shore of ruins I wasn't ready to rebuild yet. After a while, they stood up and offered their hand, not to pull me into something new, not to guide me anywhere, just to help me stand. I looked at their hand for a moment, then slowly placed mine in theirs. Their grip was warm, steady, grounding, so different from the soft, unsure touches I had waited for from him. When I stood, the world didn't feel as heavy as before. My legs were still weak, but they weren't shaking anymore. They asked if I wanted them to walk me home now. I nodded softly. I didn't want to be alone yet, not with the echo of everything still in my head, not with the memory of him walking away still fresh in my heart. We walked slowly through the quiet streets, the glow of streetlights falling across our faces like soft golden threads. The night felt peaceful in a way that made each step easier than the last. Sometimes our arms brushed gently as we walked, and every small touch stole a little more of the ache inside me. I didn't know if they felt it too. I didn't know if they noticed the way my breath softened each time their shoulder came close. But I noticed it, and that scared me a little. When we reached my door, I stopped and turned to them. The light above the entrance cast a warm glow on their face, highlighting the kindness in their eyes. They said I didn't have to thank them. They said being there with me wasn't a duty, it was something they wanted, something they chose. The word chose hit me deeper than anything that had been said that day, because someone finally chose to stay. Not because they had to, not because they were torn between two worlds, but because they wanted to be there. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My heart felt full and empty at the same time, confused but calm, wounded but held. I nodded instead, a small, quiet gesture that carried more emotion than anything I could have said. They stepped back slowly, giving me space, respecting a boundary I didn't even have to ask for. Before leaving, they said that healing doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. And one day I would wake up and feel something new grow where everything hurt today. I watched them walk away until they disappeared into the soft darkness of the street. Quote. When I finally closed the door behind me, the silence of my home wrapped around me gently. I leaned against the wood, breathing slowly, letting the quiet fill the places inside me that had been trembling all day. I walked to my room, lights dim, shadows soft around me. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the window where the night sky stretched wide, calm, patient. A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't the sharp, burning kind. It was soft, warm, almost grateful. I thought of him again, his smile, his voice, the way he looked at me, the way he walked away. The pain was still there, of course. It would stay for a while. But it wasn't the only feeling inside me anymore. Something else had begun to settle quietly beside it. Something like acceptance, something like strength, something like the promise that I would not stay broken forever. I lay down slowly, pulling the blanket up to my chest. My heart felt tired, yes, but not defeated. Just learning how to beat again after shattering. Just learning how to breathe without holding on to a hope that had hurt more than it healed. And before my eyes closed, I whispered into the quiet room, "He chose her, but I will choose myself." The words felt true in a way that made my chest warm. The night held me gently as I drifted into a sleep that, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel like running away. It felt like slowly coming back to myself.